Hi there everyone, my name is James and today I'll be talking with you about superheroes and their impact on our political world. Thank you for tuning in. Just a few things before we get going. I originally gave this talk in December of 2017. I was working in a public relations firm at the time and a lot of my colleagues were interested in politics. They were from America. We were all living in Israel at the time and we were kind of trying to dissect the political steps that had been taken in 2016. So what I want to do is kind of highlight what I spoke about with them at the time. I'm recording this about a year later, so some parts of it might be out of date. I'll do my best to update it as we go. But I just want to give a few kind of points to begin with. I want to make sure that this talk is informative, it's interesting, it'll be a bit light-hearted, it's not going to be political, or it's not going to be biased anyway. It's obviously we're going to touch on political things. It's not going to be a rant. I'm going to try and keep it as fair as possible. And of course, it will not be fake news. Okay, so obviously there are certain truths that some people may find uncomfortable. Donald Trump is president and Britain is leaving the European Union. But hopefully we will kind of get past all of our personal feelings and just try to dissect what went on. So, 2016 was the year that got nasty in politics and in pop culture alike. We saw conflicts everywhere. We saw them in our entertainment world, we saw them in our political world, and we faced examples of when the status quo got challenged. So as we can see, we saw, Marvel and DC films went head-to-head with Captain America Civil War, and former Prime Minister David Cameron went head-to-head with Boris Johnson over Brexit. And of course, on the flip side of that, we see DC, Batman vs Superman went head-to-head, as well as, of course, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. So, where did all of this take us? 2017 started off in a strange time. We're living in what I like to refer to as the Star Wars time. Our culture's been leading towards this for about 70 years. There have been moments along the way that have been highlighting this, but we haven't, alleged evil emperor who has taken over control of the government, and we have a queen who was pregnant with twins. So, what happened? Here are some, but not all of the things and people that Hillary Clinton blamed for her loss in 2017. As you can see, the list is fairly extensive. Russia, of course, and its ongoing investigation. The Democratic Party as a whole, she blamed everyone to be sexist and misogynistic. She blamed Obama. Bernie Sanders, with a U in there, excuse me, that's my English coming out to play. Of course, she blamed WikiLeaks, the debates. She blamed specifically white women, not just all women, but she blamed white women for not voting for her. She blamed James Comey, Vladimir Putin, the Electoral College, and weirdly enough, she blamed the media. Now, as we can see here, one of the most famous examples of the media before the election, as we can see here, dated November 7th, 2016, Huffington Post projected that, famously, Clinton had a 98.1% chance of winning the presidency against Donald Trump. I, however, had a different hypothesis as to who is to not necessarily blame, but who warrants our attention as to how this happened. So my hypothesis was that we saw increasingly in our pop culture divisions. Simple as, we saw people that we like going head-to-head and battling, and there were various themes that were clashed and that created conflicts throughout that year. Above, we see the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They were going head-to-head with government regulation. I'll touch on this more a bit briefly later on, but we had Captain America and Iron Man both fighting about whether or not it was all right for the government to intervene with superheroes and their lives. And with DC, we had the ideas of God versus man and who can or should be in quote-unquote a superhero position. This is a brief history of DC Comics and a few of their characters. So obviously at the top we have Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, The Flash, and a bit below Cyborg. A lot of you will recognise most of those characters from the recent DCEU and Justice League film that came out in November 2017. As you can see, DC Entertainment has partnered with Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is the film studio that distributes all of these films. They have quite a lot of creative control. They hire the filmmakers. They have editorial kind of control over the properties that they own, and it's fairly unilateral. It's Warner Brothers and DC, and Warner Brothers has access to all of the characters that DC has from a 70-year history. With Marvel, it's a bit more complicated. So Marvel actually is divided by quite a few different studios. You'll probably recognize a lot more of the characters on the right. Of course, you have Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Spider-Man. They're the main MCU heroes at the moment. And Black Panther. A bit further down, you get to X-Men and Fantastic Four. And then a few secondary characters at the bottom. You can see Vision, Agent Coulson, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Drax, and so on. And as you can notice here, actually, there are 3 studios. Marvel Studios, 20th Century Fox, more on that later, and Sony Pictures. So what actually happened with Marvel and its history is it's a bit more complicated than DC. Quite a few different film studios own property. Obviously, this needs to be updated because a lot of eager fans will know out there that Disney recently bought 20th Century Fox, or Fox. So this needs a bit more updating, but as you can see, the Marvel Studios has the myriad of characters that we see in the modern form MCU. That is the one in early 2009 when this is being recorded. Spider-Man belongs to both Sony and Marvel at the moment, and right now 20th Century Fox has the X-Men, Fantastic Four, and Deadpool character. Now, obviously, this is going to change in 2019. Disney, which owns Marvel Studios, has just bought the last leg of those characters, so everything's going to change. But why is this important? So, it's important because franchises have completely blown up the way that we consume cinema today. As we can see, franchises kind of started in the 1960s with the James Bond franchise, which is still going strong. Up until fairly recently, it was kind of the only one out there. Star Wars came and overtook it. Obviously, we saw more, like the Batman franchise, the Harry Potter franchise was a big one. But as we can see here, this is obviously a few years out of date. But Marvel, the MCU, had shot up in 10 years. And to date, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the most profitable box office franchise in history. So that's what you call cinematic disruption. Now, obviously, there's a lot to dissect here. We've mentioned a lot of heroes across a lot of different franchises and a lot of different comic book areas. So the main 4 that I'm going to be focusing on in this talk today are these 4. Arguably the most famous from the 2 sides. You've got the DC below and Marvel on top. Although that was unintentional, I'm not expressing a Marvel or DC bias in any way, at least I hope. But at the top we have Iron Man, who fought against Captain America in 2016, and we have Batman, who fought against Superman just a few months earlier in March of 2016. In the first film, Batman vs Superman, not Justice League. But as you can see, Batman and Iron Man share some quite striking similarities. They're both businessmen, they're rich, they're orphans, and they kind of have this kind of Dr. Frankenstein aspect. Iron Man built his own monster. He felt responsible during some of the seeing the repercussions of what he created. And Batman as well. He's fearful of change. He doesn't trust powerful people, and he takes control of his own actions. And what he argues is his own city. Captain America and Superman on the other side. Captain America himself is government built. He was a government program during the First World War. And you can argue that someone like Captain America actually fears peace. I read this really interesting piece that said that Captain America was built for war. He's a wartime person. He likes conflict. He thrives in it. He believes that he actually went against the government and believes that the safest hands are his own. And Superman, he's literally an alien. He stands for freedom, justice, and liberty for all. And he's from a small town. So whereas Iron Man and Batman are these metropolitan city men, you have the more humble upbringing. As we know, Captain America is from Brooklyn and Superman is from Kansas. So our main story starts, we have so much to dissect here, but our main story starts in 2008. So 2008 really saw the change, it really set the stones for a lot of the change that we still see today. So Iron Man came out, it was Marvel Studios' first film. It set off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, And at the time, it was an independent film. Marvel Studios was its own branch. It had nothing to do with Disney at the time. It was a huge gamble. The casting of Robert Downey Jr. was considered a huge gamble at the time because of his troubled personal past. And of course, The Dark Knight came out. The Dark Knight represented anarchism by the Joker, and he tested Batman with this order versus chaos idea. The Hulk, as well, was part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but based in Universal. And of course, the first election of Barack Obama. He ran on change. He was a progressive candidate. He was different. People voted for him for optimism and new beginnings and new starts. And we can really see that in 2008 in our cinema and in our politics. It was the new beginnings. Obviously, fast forward a few years, and we see 2012. We see Batman actually fighting populism. This was really interesting. So in 2012, we see Batman fighting populism. Bane was very much anti-establishment. He wanted to return the power back to the people. Batman was there to prevent that and to keep the status quo, to keep things going how they were, what he believed was the right thing, away from any chaos that could pursue. Now, of course, as we all know, 2012 saw a continuation of all of this. We saw the re-election of Barack Obama, Bane defeated by Batman, and our heroes came together for the first time as the Avengers. It had never been done before in a cinematic setting to that scope. Now, of course, on the flip side of this, we see the superheroes, we see the superhero films, how they were kind of forming and bonding and becoming an entity. We also saw the media and the establishment and how they saw unity among themselves. So, a lot of these articles are dated in 2012, just a few days after Obama's re-election. These articles are taken only a few days after Barack Obama's re-election in 2012. As you can see, CNN was already pushing the idea of Bush versus Clinton. Politico asked Back to the Future, Clinton versus Bush, and of course The Guardian, the US version of The Guardian anyway, Hillary Clinton versus Jeb Bush. With 2012 election over, speculation already turned to 2016. It's very common that we see, just a few days after America picked its president, the campaign starts again. It immediately enters this process called the invisible primaries, where donors start raising money, the media starts betting on who the candidates are going to be, potential candidates start polling and seeing if they have a chance, and basically the cycle starts almost immediately after. In America, elections really do never stop. So we can see that now in 2012. At the moment, it's been a fairly linear journey. There's been a lot of unity, there's been a lot of establishment, it's been very easy going. So what happened? In 2013 and 2014, we started seeing a few of the cracks. Storytellers started pushing boundaries to our everyday heroes and putting them in more realistic post 9/11 situations. So Zack Snyder came along and directed Man of Steel, the unofficial first outing of the DCEU. It would only come together retroactively, but he posed some really interesting questions in 2013. Suddenly, he was asking audiences, should we trust this Superman? He's an alien, come from somewhere outside of Earth. He is vastly powerful, and can we trust him? Is he doing good for us? Is he going to do good for us? And we saw Captain America as well. He saw government betrayal. He witnessed political espionage in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, in 2014's Captain America, the Winter Soldier. And he had to balance this idea of security versus freedom. Which one does he value more? Is he fighting for freedom or is he fighting for security? And suddenly these very real questions started to be asked, and audiences were being asked to think about them and to think, well, hang on, what do we value? What is too powerful? Where did these people come from? And is government too involved in our lives? Or, are they too powerful? So already we're starting to see this brewing. A few years before the 2016 election, our pop culture is already planting these seeds to skeptical audiences. So let's break it down. 2016 one of the questions it asked was government regulation And who is accountable? Who makes our decisions? On the one side, we had Iron Man. On the other side, we had Captain America. Iron Man was asking questions about accountability. Who makes these decisions? Why is a billionaire who puts on a suit any more trustworthy or accountable than a governmental service? So far at this point in the Marvel Universe, Iron Man, his intentions, however good they've been, they've often led down a bad path. You know, he created Ultron, the AI system that tried to destroy humanity. He tried to overarm the world in Iron Man 3, and basically he's becoming quite unsure of himself. On the flip side of that, Captain America, who always placed his trust in government and a higher power, or a more larger organization power, he saw the cracks in that, and he saw how power has a cost. He suddenly became very skeptical. He didn't trust these organizations, and he, quite frankly, witnessed how their corruption works. So Captain America Civil War in 2016 posed a really interesting argument to its audiences, which was, who do you trust? Who should be in control? Does the government do what's good? Does it do what's bad? Do the private citizens have a right to kind of take control of their own lives? Do they not? And suddenly audiences were getting asked these very real questions, and there was no easy answer. What the screenwriters did here is they created a film that didn't have an easy answer, didn't have a clear message, and really forced the audience to think for itself. Of course, DC had its own version of that with Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice. You had both of these people, Batman versus Superman, God and power. The themes of DC's outing were a bit more theological. It was less about government and less about grounded in political conflict, as it was more about kind of the ethos and the theology side behind things. So Batman didn't know what Superman was. He saw him destroy buildings and properties, and quite frankly, he was skeptical, and he didn't know whether this person should come out of nowhere and just assume control and power. Whereas Superman, he is unilateral, he is untrustworthy. Is he a creature? Is he a messiah? Or is he a devil in disguise? That was one of the questions that Lex Luthor often asked. Do gods come from above, or do they come from down below? Now, I'm not talking about the critical responses to these films. We all have our opinions on whether we prefer DC or whether we prefer Marvel, and we all have our opinions on which film performed better critically. Now, I'm not talking about the quality of the films, merely I'm just raising the messages of both of them. Now, honestly, how could a man like Bruce Wayne not be skeptical of Superman? He's a business owner, he's grounded in reality, he's seen the damage he can do firsthand, and quite frankly, he had every right to be anxious of him. In fact, it's at these points where our pop culture and our superhero films started to mirror the same rhetoric as the American current 2016 election. So what we saw is a very famous clip, or one of the most famous parts of the film, when Ben Affleck's Batman says to Alfred,
human race, and if we believe there's even a 1% chance that he is our enemy, we have to take it as an absolute certainty.
The now president's son, Donald Trump Jr., tweeted a very similar message during the campaign. If a bowl of Skittles, 3 would kill you and you take a handful, they're effectively pointing at the same message. So already now we're starting to see these Republican, small c conservative arguments being formed in our social media and in our media and in our films and in our politics, and it's all starting to mesh. Now, during this, there was a candidate that was rising almost out of the ashes, ready to take on the establishment. I wonder who you think I'm talking about. So, the rise of the populist candidate. He was running against the establishment. He vowed to protect the ordinary people, prided himself on not being backed by the media or the party, and he was true to himself. People loved it, people hated it, but his authenticity resonated with people. He was from New York, he had city hair. We're all dying to know who I'm talking about. If you don't already know, that's right, I'm talking about both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. They both came from either side. Now, a lot of people described Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump as the opposite. of each other during the campaign, certainly during the primaries when Saunders was still in the race. But this isn't actually true. So Trump and Saunders weren't the opposite of each other, but they were both the opposite of the same thing, which was that they were both anti the establishment. For better or for worse, people were getting fed up of the current Obama administration. They were getting bored of, they felt forgotten. They thought the establishment was continuing without them. And they looked at both of these people as their savior. The left looked at Bernie Saunders, the right looked at Donald Trump, and they both, although very different from each other, they both shared the same differences from the very thing they were fighting against. Now, how I like to think of this is I use this analogy of love and hate. The opposite of love isn't hate, the opposite of hate isn't love, but actually the opposite of both love and hate is indifference, because love and hate are both very passionate emotions, and so people feel them strongly. The opposite of love and hate aren't each other, but they are both the opposite of indifference. Now, what did the media think about all of this? Turns out they loved it. Trump was bringing in billions and billions of dollars of revenue for all of the media companies. They couldn't get enough of him. Everything he said, everything he did, people were tuning in, and the media knew it. They loved that Trump was attracting audiences. They were giving Trump far more media value than Clinton. As of November 1, 2016, he kind of provided more media value across the board, really. Online news, broadcast, blogs and forums, Twitter, of course, and print. As we can see here, 2016 compared to 2012, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, they just tower over Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. This speaks a lot about the characters of Clinton and Donald Trump, but also about the changing times. So Twitter, for example, was very different in 2012 than it was in 2016, in the same way that Twitter and social media is very different in 2019 as it was in 2016. At the same time, the media is loving this. As we can see here, the media is having a lot of fun. Now, I beg you to spot the difference between these four. Obviously, we have the real candidates, Trump and Saunders, on the left. And we have Alec Baldwin and Larry David on the right, often performing as the candidates in SNL. We're starting to see politics and entertainment really merging in ways we haven't quite seen before. There are famous moments when politicians appear on chat shows as themselves, and there have been SNL skits before where they imitate existing candidates, but never before had SNL given such attention, with the exception of maybe Tina Fey and Sarah Palin in 2008. Never before has there been such a vastly kind of merge of everything. So, in fact, November 7th, 2015, Donald Trump actually appeared on SNL, and they couldn't resist having him on. He was so good for ratings that he was disrupting the system left, right, and centre that they invited him onto the show. It was the highest rated show in 3 years, since 2012. 1 year from this moment, he was to be elected President of the United States. But none of this came without its cost. Over time, trust in media started to completely erode. The more the media reported on Trump's election, the less people kind of liked them. There was clickbait articles, there was hateful articles, there was the rise of what some people call fake news, which is not so necessarily fake, but just misleading, omission of truth to skew fact. And it was quite clear that, especially during the 2016 campaign, that the media had an agenda. They wanted to keep Clinton and the establishment going, while to kick out Bernie Saunders and Donald Trump. So what happened? The top left is the election result by county, but the one straight below it is divided into, mapped by popular vote. So as we all know, Hillary Clinton actually won the popular vote by 3 million votes. And you can see here, that's because she won in very high density populated areas. You can see the bottom left map strongly correlates with where half the US population lives. So half the US population actually only lives in 9 states, which is crazy to think. Half the US population is roughly 161.5 million. The 9 most populous states, 161 million. So some will argue that that's why the Electoral College exists, because if it didn't exist, candidates would just travel to these 9 or 10 states, ensure a 51% or 50.1% mark of the electorate, and be crowned president. sorry, I shouldn't say crowned, be elected president. What the Electoral College guarantees is that it's more representative of what America wants, which is what the top left graph demonstrates. Now in Britain, on the right, we can see divisions as well. London hugely voted to remain in in the European Union. For anyone wondering, yes, I'm from London specifically. Not that that influenced my vote in any way. Again, I'm impartial. But Scotland also voted vastly to remain. But where was the media in all of this? So this is another map that highlights the counties with the most amount of media. So as we can see, it's the West Coast in California, the East Coast in New York, New England, and Florida, and a bit in the Midwest with Chicago. Now this map is very similar to the population map, and it's very similar to the Electoral College votes. I mean, the correlation between them is very strong. Where there was more media, there were more blue results, there was more Democratic support, and in areas where there were fewer journalists, more people voted for Donald Trump. But how did they get it so wrong? How did the media completely miss what the rest of the country was saying? So here are some of this is what happened. Here are some of the predictions from some of your favorite mainstream media outlets, or maybe not your favorite, I don't know. CNN had Hillary winning at 91%, Huffington Post at 98%, as we discussed earlier, New York Times 85%, 538, a bit more balanced and nuanced, had it 72. Either the pollsters did such a bad job that they should be fired, or they just had an agenda and were deliberately doing a bad job to try and skew votes and get Hillary elected. So it's really quite amazing how many outlets got it wrong and why. But bye-bye establishment. Here is the 2012 candidate and now current Senator Mitt Romney walking out of the White House without a job in the Trump administration. Who would have thought it? The former host of The Apprentice has just been elected the President of the United States. So where are we today? We're now in a place where the former host of The Apprentice is president, and two-time presidential candidate, former Secretary of State, former Senator, former First Lady, is signing books in a Costco next to the toilet paper. I don't think many people could have predicted this timeline. I think in 2019 we're a bit more at least used to it, but certainly in 2017 when I first gave this talk, audiences would often gasp at the sheer comparison that these photos would present. It was still very raw at the time, it was still very cutting, something that this photo would evoke in people. But, like I said, it's not the first time a president has been elected without winning the popular vote. So let's look at some of those. Here are some of the most recent elections from 1992 onwards. Obviously, we all know that Bill Clinton was elected president in 1992, but what many people don't know is that Ross Perot ran as an independent. He actually got 19% of the vote. Here we go, we can see here, he got 19% of the vote, 19 million votes. But the way that the Electoral College voting system works, for better or for worse, he got no votes, he got no seats. And Bill Clinton received 43% of the votes versus current president, or then President Bush 41. Now, interestingly, Bill Clinton only won by 5 million votes and 6 percentage points. One often thinks, if Ross Perot didn't run, where would some of these 19 million votes have gone to? It's not hard to believe that George H.W. Bush would have been elected a second term if it was not a third party. So as we can see here, one president got elected in without the majority, the plurality. Famously, in 2000, Bush versus Gore, it was about 500,000 votes between the two. It was all decided in Florida when that Supreme Court basically decided the president of the United States. A lot of people don't know, in 2008, during the primary season between Clinton and Obama, as we can see here, in terms of the delegate count, even though Barack Obama received more delegates in 2008, Hillary Clinton actually received more votes overall. Hillary Clinton is the only person in history of the world to run for president twice, receive more votes than her opponent twice, and still lose. So that's pretty amazing by whoever you support in this. It's quite amazing that Clinton could run twice receive more votes twice and lose twice. And of course, most famously, in 2016, Hillary Clinton received 65 million votes versus Donald Trump's 62. That's some of the breakdown. So now what we have is someone who once represented the populist villain, such as Bain, to say, giving it back to the people. This is for you, I'm doing this for you. We now have Trump mirroring the same rhetoric. There's a direct line from Trump's inaugural speech in 2017 that is word for word the same as Bain. It's something to the effect of, we give it back to you, the people.
And giving it back to you, the people.
And we give it back to you, the people.
Where did 2017 take us? A year after the election, we saw Infinity War. That was actually in 2018, but in 2017 we saw the return to normal. Justice League was in 2017. Critically and financially, it was interesting. It was kind of had mixed reviews. It wasn't seemed so popular at the time, but what we saw was our heroes coming back and fighting together again. And Infinity War Part 1, at time of recording this, we've only seen Infinity War. We haven't seen Endgame just yet. But as we know, our heroes come together to fight Thanos. Unfortunately, real life isn't as clean as that. Some people are still feeling the effects of 2016, both in Britain and in America. So 2020, where does it leave us? We live in this strange time where people are shouting for The Rock to run for president. Mark Zuckerberg was briefly thinking about it, although it was never formally announced. Kid Rock, unfortunately, it was a marketing ploy. Mark Cuban showed an interest, and of course Kanye, as a fan of the current President Trump. So yeah, we've now seen a complete mixture between our politics and our pop culture, superheroes, supervillains, and how we got there. I hope this has been interesting. I hope I've answered some of your questions. If I haven't, please leave them in the comment section below, and I will try my hardest to provide some sources to some of the information that I provided. I can answer any more questions in more depth. Please like, subscribe, comment, and I'm just going to do one more thing, which is suggest some further reading. These are the books that I read soon after the election. We had Shattered, about Hillary Clinton's campaign, Game of Thorns, about generally the 2016 election, as well as some superhero books, which I really like. I'm currently reading Tucker Carlson's Ship of Fools, which came out in 2018, so I'm only about halfway through that. That's proving to be really interesting, shedding some insights. But yeah, please let me know if I've missed anything out or if you have any questions, and I will happily answer them. So thank you very much.